Hello everyone and welcome. This is Eclectic Kelpi, where we dive into the treasure trove of fantastical media. And on today's episode of Bookended, our literary review series, we are going to be talking about The Shadow of the Tenebris Court trilogy, Kiss of Iron, Touch of Poison, and Promise of Lies. I was originally thinking about doing individual reviews for each of the books in the series, but honestly, I them all so fast, and they all blended really well into one another, so I decided that I might as well just review them all at once in one epic completionist review. Quick heads up, this is going to be a spoiler review, but I will mark where we start getting into the spoiler content, so if you haven't read The Shadow of the Tenebris Court book series yet and don't want to ruin any of the surprises, then come back once you're done and we can have a nice chat about the book series. But with that, let's dive into the episode. Couple of things right off the bat. I loved these books. I loved the themes. I loved the main plot. It was fun. The characters, for the most part, were really well developed. And there was some material in these books that was a little bit heavy, but I thought that it was handled really well. That being said, please make sure to read the trigger warnings before getting into these books because they do touch on some traumatic material that we will talk about. But I think that it was handled with care and with the intention of creating catharsis through art, which I absolutely love. With all of the things that I love about this series, there are quite a few things that, at least in the first two books, there could definitely have been some improvements for, but the author does significantly improve her writing style and some of the specific things that I will get into as we talk about the dislikes and wishes sections of each of the books, but she does really improve as we go, so it was fantastic. And such a delight. And even though there was like a couple of things that I would have changed or wished for, it was such a fun ride, and I will highly recommend this series because it was just such a fun experience. The author does significantly improve as the books go on, but the writing style is a little bit all over the place at some points, but we'll get into the specifics when we get into the spoiler section of each book. I think the series is a little bit of a bear with me in terms of the writing style and a couple of other things that we will get into specifics for, but ultimately, I think it's so worth it because it's such a good and fun story. The story is genuinely very good, and like I said, the writing does get better as the series goes on, but if you can stick with it, then there's a lot of beauty to take away from with these books. I also read these books on my Kindle Unlimited. All three of them are available, so highly recommend also get your Kindle and sit back and enjoy. They're really fun. So the first book of The Shadow of the Tenebris Court, A Kiss of Iron, follows Lady Catherine, who is facing financial ruin due to her husband's poor financial management skills. When she is called away to court by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, this is set in a fantasy medieval Scotland, which I also love, and Catherine is employed by the Queen's spy master to get close to the visiting Fae diplomats that are trying to win the Queen's hand in marriage. There are some suspicions that the Fae coming from the Dusk Court, as there is a Dusk and a Dawn Court, are trying to plan some sort of nefarious scheme against the human kingdom. Catherine begins to spy, and of course ends up getting personally close with Bastion, the most feared and dangerous Fae of all the visiting dignitaries. This book is very court intrigue, murder mystery, a bit of a more graphic Bridgerton, if you will. And it all culminates at the Queen's wedding to one of the Fae dignitaries. The plots are revealed, secrets are discovered, and something bigger behind the scenes is preparing to unfold. The slow burn was a delight. I love that Catherine was in her 30s. We love to see adults in adult fantasies rather than like 19 or 20-year-olds. It's nice to see there being representation of a little bit older adults. They're not even old. 30 isn't even old, but like older compared to the Akatars, you know, and the Fourth Wings, and a lot of them, to be honest. There's a lot of 19 and 20-year-olds. But anyways, so Catherine being 30, we love to see it. We love the representation of adults in adult fantasy. Catherine is a really strong woman that gets to come into herself and learn her value while dealing with the patriarchal limitations that have been imposed onto her. And now I'm going to get into my loves, likes, wishes, tropes, etc., all of the sort of nitty-gritty specifics for each of the books. And this marks the official spoiler warning for the rest of the video. Proceed at your own discretion. So for Kiss of Iron, my loves. I love the real traditional depiction of the Fae. I love the mythology that the author used. Genuinely, it's just so cool to see the classical fae representation. So they can't lie, they can't create, so they really appreciate beautiful things. And there's a lot of really fun conversations with Catherine and Bastian, because one of Catherine's things is that she loves flowers and greenery and stuff like that, and the fae, of course, obviously also love greenery and nature and stuff like that. But it's just really cool that when they're talking about beauty and the purpose of beauty in terms of art, in terms of just nature, in terms of creating music and stuff like that, like, the purpose is to experience the beauty. And so some of the conversations around, like, purpose and the point of things, and, you know, everything needing to have, like, a reason for existing and to be useful for some sort of, like, function, which, because Catherine has a little bit of a complex with that, it's really cool to have those two contrasting perspectives around the purpose of beauty and the appreciation of creating things. But yeah, the mythology around the fae, I loved it. I love when they use traditional fae canon. I loved the story, and I loved the characters' motivations. They all felt really well driven and meaningful to the plot. All of the characters want something, because of course, what's gonna drive it's the motivations, right? Is what drives the story, and it's not just like things happening to the characters. They actually have motivations and goals and drive and want things within the world. So I think that all of that's really well depicted, really well done, and it gets you so invested because it all makes sense, and it's all fueled from backstory and experiences. And yeah, the plot is fantastic, and I loved it. Again, I loved that Catherine was 30. It was so fun to see an adultier adult in a fantasy series, because she's still strong. They have, like, tournaments and stuff, and she's very capable and competent, and she still gets to go on these grand adventures even though she's 30, because life doesn't stop at 30. And so it's really cool to see her still be able to progress and experience within the world while also representing adultier adults. She also represents a different kind of strength, which was really interesting to see. It's an internal strength. So we have a lot of the like Sairus Fanes in Quicksilver, who's like really like the active the active strength. Katniss Everdeen, obviously everybody's got a bow and arrow, which I love also, but she represents a different, like, internalized quiet strength, where it's emotional strength and it's mental strength and it's endurance in terms of what she's experienced internally and also externally. But it's really cool to see that it's not just about having physical strength, and of course that's beautiful to see in pieces of media as well. We love to see a good action sequence, but it's also so refreshing and beautiful to see that quiet internal strength that's still as important and meaningful as somebody who's gonna go out and do a grand sort of physical quest or big action fighting sequences. Yeah, and ultimately Catherine's just a very well-developed character. I really enjoyed her and how she was written and how she goes through the story and grows and develops throughout the trilogy. Kiss of Iron had really good spice. You can read it to get more information about that. I really enjoyed the side characters. The dressmaker was giving Edna mode so hard, and I was living. It was so good. I also loved Ella. I think Bastian is one of my favorite love interests, and I think Bastian's one of my favorite love interests now. Just, like, full stop. Like, he's actually, I have so many good things to say about Bastian. We're gonna get into Bastian as we go along, but I love Bastian so much. We'll get into him a lot in the second, when we're talking about the second and the third book, but, like, Bastian is a masterpiece. But all the characters were really good. I don't think there was any character that I felt was not developed to the effectiveness that they were needed. How do I simplify that? I didn't feel like any character needed more detail than what they got. Like, the side antagonists, like the little, like, you know, the assholes at court kind of thing, like, they didn't need more detail put into them. I felt like all of the characters that did need to have detail and did need to be well developed, I loved them. I thought that a lot of the personalities that were in these books were fantastic, and every character got what they needed in terms of being able to be presented to the readers. Yes. Very efficient with characters. I really liked that. I really liked the depictions of trauma and PTSD. I really loved the panic attack after Catherine's uncle choked her, and I loved the realism of how she was handling her experiences. I feel like it's one of those things that's so uncomfortable observing and reading and being exposed to, but this was done in a way that I think was with understanding and respect for the horrible experiences. I think the levels of Catherine's trauma were depicted well. Though I do feel like this could be a point of contention and will be extremely personal to each individual who is reading this book, but I thought that the trauma was cathartic and triumphant, especially as the series goes on. But there is some graphic stuff in this series, so take care of yourself and your own well-being first. And that's why I said make sure that you're reading the trigger warnings, because there is no essay. Bare minimum. Bare minimum. There is no essay, but there is some graphic violence against women in this. So, yeah, again, check it out before you get into it, because take care of yourself first. Now for my dislikes. There wasn't a lot, but some of it was distracting while I was reading. So, again, like I said, it's a little bit of a bear with me kind of a series, because I do think that the whole, like, the end is really worth it, but there's a couple of things. So, what I didn't like in A Kiss of Iron is there was too much going on. The author really wanted to include, like, all of her ideas, and I feel like there was just certain things that didn't need to be included for pacing's sake, and for making sure that we were keeping to the important points. So, a really big one of this in particular was Catherine's sister showing up. Her name was Avis, and then she, like, went off and became, like, a pirate captain, and now she's a pirate queen, and she came to court, and there was, like, a whole, like, it wasn't even, like, it just felt, like, so out of nowhere. But I do understand that the author was, like, tying that in to her, like, previous series. She did write the story of Avis becoming a pirate queen before she wrote The Shadow of the Tenebris Court, so she wanted to, like, intertwine the stories. So, like, I get it, I appreciate it, I hear you, I understand. It didn't need to be here. It didn't need to have a tie-in that was so meaningless, because, like, yes, one of the other, like, pirates stays and hangs out and stays with Catherine, and it's fine, and they become friends, and there's, like, a connection to her sister. However, it was so rushed, and it just, again, like, it felt like the author really wanted to just do all of her ideas, so it was a little bit messy in terms of execution, because I really wanted to stay on the, like, main plot, but the author wanted to bring in some additional components. I felt like it was a little bit distracting, but yeah. Ultimately, again, not a deal breaker. It was just a little bit messy. Next point, things were getting resolved just a little bit too quickly to matter, or things were coming out of nowhere, like, again, Avis and the Pirate Queen. Like, again, I recognize that she's bringing in her, like, character from her other story, and they are like, Catherine and Avis are sisters. However, again, like, it was super out of nowhere. The two series should have been separate components. Yeah, it was just really, like, out of nowhere, because, of course, like, I haven't read her first works. Maybe if I had have read the pirate series first, I might have appreciated that Avis was in Kiss of Iron, but I did not, because it was distracting and out of nowhere and just felt messy. I feel like if she wanted to make certain things plot points or meaningful, then give them the time and space that they need to actually be included in the book, otherwise it's gotta go. I get it, we have, you know, I struggle also editing my works, because you want to have everything be, like, super perfect and tight and you want to include everything that you are like thinking and creating, but at some point you gotta do a little snip and get the things out of there that don't need to be there. So, but yeah, again, it wasn't a deal breaker. It was too many things. And my last dislike for A Kiss of Iron is the writing was a little bit messy. So there was a lot of sidetracking and they went off into places that were unnecessary and it was a little bit jarring. So like, again, it's kind of like a focus issue. The author was trying to cram too much in, and so there was a lot of sidetracking, and the writing was a little bit messy. And the writing style was a little bit messy, but what's really nice is that it does improve through the series. Like, I was really, really impressed by the improvement as I was continuing to read through the rest of the trilogy. But yeah, just the first one is a little bit messy, so you have to really get through that one. It's still an enjoyable story, but in terms of the writing, you kind of have to get through it a little bit to be able to continue to enjoy the series. So you kind of have to just like meet it where it's at, and then and then just keep going, and then you're gonna enjoy it. But yeah, it's a little bit of a you got to just commit to the bit and then let it run. And then my big and only wish for Kiss of Iron was that she was focused and didn't do the like side quest business that was going on. I just needed the story to be a little bit more focused and succinct. And then the tropes in book 1 were forced proximity, liar revealed, arranged marriage, touch her and you die, classic, one bed, praise kink, resistant to love. I wouldn't call this an enemies to lovers because they're not really, like, it's not enemies to lovers, so I'm changing that to being resistant to love. So, like, Bastion is like, no, I don't want to fall in love with you. And Catherine's like, no, I don't want to fall in love with you. But then eventually they do fall in love and live happily ever after. Obviously. And then lastly, finding the power that was in her all along. Overall, I loved the action. I loved the characters. I was engaged with this book from start to finish. I just needed it to be a little bit tighter in its writing. And that's why I gave it a 3.5 stars out of 5 and 3.5 flames out of 5. I think that this one was the spiciest of the 3 books. The second one and the third one are definitely not as actively spicy, but the last book, when it does have spice, is very spicy. However, it's not a main focal point because the romance is kind of settling down to focus on the rest of the plot. So yeah, there's not as much, but when it's spicy, it's spicy. Now for book 2, A Touch of Poison. Catherine, after drinking the poison meant to kill Bastion, finds that she has survived, but her newly gained magic from the combination of treatments and Bastion's blood infusion that kept her from dying has now given her the powers of poisonous touch, where she can only make physical contact with Bastion as his blood was the one that was used to heal her. This book now follows the court intrigue and machinations of the Fey realm, which I found much more interesting once the book gets going. And this is also when we see a better picture of the Fae and how they are represented. It's much more like Cruel Prince with a lot of variations to the Fae and how they physically appear. It's really cool. It's really good. And the main Catherine plot is her going through treatments to try and take away her poison. She is scared she can't control her new magic, and she is actively poisoned at this time, so an antidote is kind of necessary. While Catherine's dealing with that, Bastion is dealing with a rebel group that is trying to depose the monarchy. This book splits into 2 POVs with Catherine and Bastion, and for this book, I think that it works because both of their stories are compelling and it elevates the exploration of the story and the world. The tone does shift a lot between the first and second book. My first thought when I started the very first chapter of A Touch of Poison, I was like, what the f*** am I reading? Am I in a buddy cop book now? The start of the book was really disjointed from the first book, especially starting in Bastion's POV, but as the book goes on, it does get a lot better. This book has a lot of good pining and engaging mystery. So, the things that I loved about Touch of Poison. Firstly, I loved Catherine again and more. She is flawed and she needs to grow, but she is so strong and so stubborn, and she is so relatable. So I think she's fantastic. She's authentically kind, but she's also stubborn, and she has a lot of trauma habits that she has to sort through because the impact from the first book is carrying over into the second, which is fantastic. She has still a lot of growth to go through, as we're only on book 2 out of 3. So I really, really loved her in this book. Further going into that, Kat's healing journey and her reclaiming of herself, her body, her voice, and releasing the bonds of control that were placed onto her by the oppressive men from her human world life. And like, also, it's not just about Bastion being her support system. She actually has friends. Like, she actually has other people in her life that Bastion is not connected to, has not touched, and has not influenced, which is so also refreshing to see. It's not just about Bastion helping her through her healing journey, which he of course does because he's a fantastic support system to her, but she also has independent friendships. She also has people that are just meant to interact with her and be a part of her journey. And that's also the same for Bastion. He also has people who are independently his friend. And I love to see that. I feel like this, we're gonna get also into this more as we go, but like, I feel like this book series was such a really healthy and strong representation of relationships, which, as much as I love some of these books, they're not all great representations of romantic relationships. But I think this one actually is. So that's wild concept, but we continue. I loved Elfheim. I loved the environment and the setting and the world and the magic and the high fantasy of it all. It was just a delight. I think that how they represented Tenebris and the two courts and like dawn and dusk and the descriptions and the colors and how the Fae look depending on what court they're from and the landscapes and the different, like, we do travel outside of like Tenebris Luminous itself and go into the like Elfheim countryside, and just, it's so fucking good. It is so good, and I just enjoyed being in the world and being in the environment, and it was delightful. Yeah, really, really good, strong descriptions of the world. I loved Bastion. He is his own point. I loved Bastion. He is actually a good person, and he loves Kat. I love that he has never been mean to her, never disrespected her, and never been an asshole, like how I had said that, like, Kingfisher was just the worst at the beginning of Quicksilver. Kingfisher sucked. Like, I don't know. I personally just don't have the capacity to put up with that kind of shit anymore. But, like, Bastion is actually just a good person and treats her the bare minimum. I love him. Bastion is just a good man, and it's probably actually just the bare minimum, but he listens and he learns and he grows with Kat. And yes, they have the whole neither will budge because both of them think that the other is mad and hurt about what happened when they were both spies in the human court. But once they actually do communicate, it's perfection. And how they communicate is perfection. Read the book just for the two of them, honestly. It's delight. Next point. Bastion's dad and Catherine are the grumpy sunshine, and it is adorable. It is actually so fun. So there's a whole thing where Catherine accidentally finds Bastion's dad. Like, it's a whole thing. But I love so much their dynamic and how Catherine's just like, I'm gonna weasel my way into having you like me, and we're gonna be friends, and now you're just my friend. And I love Bastion's dad and Catherine's dynamic because it's just so good, and they have such good energy together, and I really like how he also helps her grow, and it's just, yeah, so good. I also loved Catherine's unhealthy coping mechanisms and her struggle. Yes, she feels like she needs to escape from traumatic memories with drinking and mind altering, and she gets to a point where she learns better coping strategies, but this adds to her relatability because trauma can lead to substance use. So I don't obviously love that she has like horrible strategies for dealing with the trauma, but I love that it's depicted that she has these unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with her negative experiences. It really feels like, again, the author took the things that she wanted to talk about in her story, because it happens, man. Like, bad things happen to people in the world, and we have to be able to talk about them and demystify them so we can have real conversations and people can feel comfortable and safe sharing their stories in healthy, productive ways. And this is part of that. It's because going through something so traumatic, especially with like Catherine's trauma in her childhood and how a bunch of people have treated her, having these responses to those memories of those experiences, of course she's going to have her own ways of managing and dealing with things because she's been through so much. So I think that it's fantastic because of the relatability that Catherine brings to extreme childhood trauma. Yeah, I like that she's not perfect and that she has to learn and grow and get better, and she learns how to better take care of her mental health, and it's beautiful. And lastly, the best part of this book was when Catherine kills her abusive husband Robin, and it's the most triumphant scene in the whole book, and I love it. And I love how she walks out of there afterwards, and I love how she stands in front of the entire court of Tenebris Luminous, and she's just like, you know what? This is the problem. Nobody would let me get a divorce because it's all like old medieval Scotland, and that wasn't a thing back then. But they were like, there are some contracts, especially for when she's talking about the Fae and the Fae world, and their whole thing with like making deals and contracts and you can't break your word. But she's like, sometimes you can't just follow these traditions, and sometimes you can't just do things the way that we've always done them because we've always done them this way. There are some situations when priority has to be taken on to the individual and the individual context and situation. And I loved it. It was so good. It was so empowering and fantastic. And I loved it. And the only thing that I have that I didn't like with this book was the regression of the love story. And then they had to repeat it. So essentially, like, Catherine and Bastian have sort of a pseudo breakup because they both have hurt each other, because they both lied either by omission or lied outright to the other because of their spying situation in the first book. So they're like, oh, you hurt me and you used me and etc. And so they do this big, like, it's very dramatic and a whole thing, but they still love each other, but they don't want to love each other. So I didn't like that they redid the love story, but at least they did it okay. Yeah, I didn't like the repetition of having to do a whole plot point all over again. But also, while that, there was a lot of, like, there was Catherine's A plot, there was Bastian's A plot, and then there was a couple of B plots. But I feel like in this book, the B plots were managed better, and it wasn't as chaotic as the first one, but it was still a little bit chaotic. And my only wish for this one was I wanted stronger consistency with the writing style and the tone, though there was improvement. So yeah, again, just the writing style, and there was a big shift between book 1 and book 2, but I think once we kind of got underway, it really evened itself out. But yeah, I was just wishing for consistency, stronger consistency within the writing and within the books themselves. And the tropes for this one were very, very much the same as book 1, with the 2 additions of feminine rage, which, again, I loved so much, so good. And this was a slow burn. The first one was a little bit of a slow burn, but they do, because Catherine's intention for the first one is to seduce Bastian, it's not that much of a slow burn, but this one is much slower. It's much more like growing together. So yeah, that was good. And my final thoughts on Touch of Poison are, this book is very engaging. So much happens, and the story picks up very strongly. It was a little bit of a clumsy start, but as we go, it really grabbed me. I liked the twist with Princess Shura being alive, and the pre-held beliefs about the world that Bastian held were being challenged. This book also ended with a huge bang, with the Dawn wedding being a bloody disaster. Think very red wedding. And Catherine being called to be a guest to Dawn, and the setup for the grand finale of the final book, which was very well done. It was just a bit of a clumsy start that led into a really creative and compelling adventure. I gave this one 3 stars out of 5 and 2 little flames out of 5. And finally, the epic conclusion, A Promise of Lies. I had such a good time with this one. I wrote so much in my journal, actually, at my reading journal. Typically, a review is gonna get like 1 page. This was Bridge Kingdom, this is Traitor Queen. Each of them only gets usually about 1 page. But Promise of Lies, I had so much to say about it. It's 2 full pages. Because and this is all of the things that I loved. I have so many things that I loved about this book. We're gonna get into it. And this book is really why I say stick with the series if you can get past some of the clunky writing in the previous books, because this one is a banger. We jumped straight into the story exactly where we left off, with Kat being taken over to the Dawn side of court, and we are right into the action, and it doesn't stop from page 1. The pacing is very well done, and I cared a lot about what both Kat and Bastian are going through. So none of the chapters feel like, oh, I have to get through this one to get back to the plot that I actually care about, or get back to this plot line. No, both are really interesting, captivating, and enjoyable. And speaking of the chapters, I really loved that the chapter lengths are all around 10 or 12 pages. So it all feels like it feels like we're going through it really fast. And I just loved that it was very symmetrical. Like each chapter was like 10 or 12 pages. And it was just really cute. Because I always actually, when I'm reading a book or my Kindle, I'll like look at how many pages there are per chapter, because I will never stop mid-chapter. So if I'm like winding down and I'm like, oh, I'm only gonna read 1 more chapter, we all know what that actually means, but I always do try to only read 1 more chapter. When I say that I'm only gonna read 1 more chapter, I try. But anyway, so it's really cute that they like 10 pages per chapter was cute, and it feels like it's going very quick. And this book made me cry, which makes it a bonus for how good I think that it was, because if a book can make me cry, it was good. The stakes felt really high, and I just cared a lot about the plot and the characters. I was just really invested, and the tension was great. So Kat is now in the Dawn Court acting as a spy because she believes the newly crowned King Cyrus was the one who had the old king killed, along with all of the others in the wedding massacre in book 2. Bastian is tasked by Queen Brea to find this mythical relic to end the day and night sleeping curse on the Dawn and Dusk Court rulers. It all comes together in a big reveal that Bastian is the son of Brea's eldest daughter, Nyx, whom Brea had killed, and Bastian has to reconcile with being loyal to a tyrant who is also his grandmother. The book actually does a very good job of making it all work out and make sense. And then the grand finale battle and the implementing of democracy over a monarchy. It's kind of absurd, but it was super enjoyable, and it really works. The story was just a delight. I had a lot of things that I loved about this one, so let's jump in. The pace was so strong. I was always wanting to read just 1 more chapter, and I loved Kat's and Bastian's POVs, like I had mentioned. I loved the stakes, and there was so much tension. Like, it was a lot. There was so much going on. It was great. I loved Kat's intelligence and her resourcefulness, and that it was all set up very well, and then it paid off very authentically. She was just the MVP. Like, genuinely, I think that she was such a fantastically well done character through the whole entire series. Like, I loved her. All of the foreshadowing that I didn't know was foreshadowing paid off from the whole series. There was so much that the author had set up, and it came to mean something, and I loved having those whoa moments. Yeah, definitely, I actually really recommend reading them in succession with each other, because there's so much, and they're such easy reads. So like, enjoy, and you'll like see the like very, very subtle foreshadowing, but that's why it pays so well when we get to the end. I loved that queerness was just normalized in the fairy world. It's just a thing. There's no, like, commentary around it. There's no, like, there's nothing to say about it. Like, it's just a part of their society. Like, there just is queer people, and I loved that because there was no, like, oh, like, yeah, like, these guys are gay, or, oh, yeah, like, that nobody ever had to come out. It was just introducing these characters and being like, oh, yes, this is their partner. There was no commentary on it. It was just love is love, and that is what it's supposed to be. I love Kat and Bastian as a couple. They are one of the healthiest, with the best communication that I've ever read. 10 out of 10. He is kind. They listen and they want to understand each other. And like with Kat not wanting to be married, and she explains like why and like what's going on with her around that. But like, yeah, they actually like care about each other. They really love each other and they talk like adults, and that's so refreshing, and I love that. I love that so much. It is an actual adult fantasy, and I love that. There is no age gap. They're both in their 30s, and they're still adventuring, and they're still being badasses. So, perfect. Life is still grand even after your 20s. I loved the relatability and the emotionality. The impact of the storytelling and the journey were very well done, and it all ended very beautifully. And lastly, and again, ties in to the first one, I loved Catherine killing Rufus, her shitty uncle who was horrible and mistreated her so badly. I loved her getting her recompense. So good. I had so much to love about this book. And now for some of the things that I didn't like about Promise of Lies. Firstly, I did not like Cyrus. I feel like he was just a Joffrey remake from Game of Thrones. Like, that was the whole point, of course, is to not like him. Like, he's supposed to be the worst. But I just really didn't like him. So, that's why he's on my dislikes. Yeah, I feel like he was just very one note. It was very, like, yeah. I didn't like him. Next is Brea dying twice was extremely unnecessary. We could have gotten the information about where Bastian got his body-splitting powers from without that second confrontation. It took away from the epic death by ravens. I understand that it gave both Bastian and his dad the opportunity for vengeance, but it really, really slowed down the ending. That was already pulling a Return of the King with how many endings it was trying to do all in one thing. But adding like another fake out death, there was 3 fake out deaths in this book. We only needed the one. I think we only needed Kat's. Kat's was great. Like, you know, her whole thing with like having to die, go to like the Unseelie court and like, you know, have that like interaction with Bastian's dad. Like, that's great. No, one fake out death was more than enough. So Brea's fake out death, unnecessary. It slowed down the ending and it was too much. So I didn't like it. But yeah, it was just the 2 things actually that I didn't like about Promise of Lies that I have listed in my notes. So yeah, overall, like, Promise of Lies was really, really fucking good, and I liked it a lot. I do have a few wishes though. First, I wish for a stronger, true ending. So this was another one of the times that the author tried to do everything that she wanted, but we really needed to have an ending that ended. So there was a lot to wrap up, and it really felt like the Return of the King movie endings where there was so many endings. And then we finally get to the true ending and it's like, okay, cool. It's done. But like, there was just too many endings and it needed to just be a little bit more concise and rounded out, and then let's, you know, grand finale, conclusion, thank you, loved it, goodbye. You know, just needed to be a little bit tighter. There was a lot to wrap up, and it felt a little bit self-indulgent, and it could have been more concise. So I wish that the author had been a little bit more concise with her endings. It does feel like she was a little bit too precious with the work and wanted to have it exactly like this one particular ending, and I relate to that a lot because that's kind of how I am with my work, is I like to have it be like the one perfect final note. But I feel like in this instance it didn't really serve to have it go on for such a long time, and I feel like if it had been more concise and wrapped up a little bit nicer, it would have been stronger and a stronger finale. But ultimately, I did like how it ended. It just was a lot of endings. So I wish it had been a bit more concise. And then lastly, I understand that she wanted to do a full circle callback moment for the end, but it could have been left on a stronger note without running on. But this is really picky, and it wasn't that offensive, and it didn't ruin the experience. Like, the grand finale was kind of doing a callback to what I was saying about earlier with, like, Kiss of Iron, where Bastian is kind of, like, talking with Kat about, like, the purpose of beauty and what's your purpose and what's like the point of existing. Is it just like, and even like flowers that are just meant to be beautiful and provide beauty to the world, they still have a purpose and they're still important even if they don't do some grand function. And so it does that callback moment at the very end where Catherine doesn't have like a purpose anymore because she's not in survival mode anymore. So it kind of like, I do like the note that they left on, but it, again, I feel like if that was the note she wanted, like the author wanted to leave it on, she could have cut out a couple things before that to make it just a concise, strong, good, fully rounded out finale. So, yeah. And then the tropes. Long lost heir, plots against the kingdom, basically the same as book 1 and 2. It's very much like the through line of tropes was very consistent throughout the series. And then my final thoughts. A Promise of Lies was fantastic. I'm really happy with the plot twists and the foreshadowing that came together in the end. I love that the whole story was about healing and coming into your own authentic self. This book felt like the perfect conclusion to the series. The author really improved with each book, and that was a really fun part of the experience too. Every book felt like an elevation from the last. I was very satisfied and I engaged with the story. I loved Kat and Bastian, but I also liked them as characters. I liked who they became, I liked the journey that they went on, and I loved that they grew. I also loved the representation in these books for queer people, for older adults in fantasy, for diverse body types. It was just really well done. And I loved that this was a true adult fantasy. I gave Promise of Lies 4 stars out of 5 and 2 little flames out of 5. However, like I had previously mentioned, the spice in this, though there isn't a lot, when it is spicy, it's ghost pepper spicy. Proceed at your own discretion. And at the end of it all, I would recommend this series, but I would encourage people to check the warnings, and even though there isn't a lot of spice, the spice that is in these books is pretty graphic and intense, so just know what you're walking into, but I really did enjoy this adventure. And those were my thoughts on the Shadow of the Tenebris Court series. Let me know in the comments below your likes, dislikes, wishes, and thoughts that you had while you were reading. Or if you are here and haven't read the series yet, have you been persuaded to check it out? Let me know. If you have enjoyed this episode of Bookended, consider giving a like and subscribing to continue joining us on all of our adventures. But with that, thank you all so much for watching. Everything with love, and we'll see you next time in the Treasure Trove. Bye!